Okay, well hi everybody. It's noon on my clock, so I think it's about time for us to get started with our February Talks on Tuesday webinar. I want to welcome you all who joined us today. I'm happy that you decided to spend your lunch break with me. My name is Dana Childress, and I work with the Partnership for People with Disabilities at VCU as part of the Integrated Training Collaborative Project. And our project is tasked with coordinating the professional development activities for early intervention providers in Virginia. So I'm really excited today to be wearing both hats. I'm presenting today, and I guess I'm hosting for myself. So I'll be doing both roles today. I am really happy to have Jeannie Schroeder joining me. Jeannie is our technical specialist who makes sure everything goes off without any kinks. So Jeannie's online helping, and Dina Buck is also online as a moderator to help in case anything comes up. So Jeannie and Dina, I'm really grateful to have you here. So what we're going to do today is we're going to spend the next hour thinking about early intervention in different ways. We're going to talk specifically about toy bags and about how to let them go, why to let them go, and really what is best aligned with recommended practices in our field. We're also going to talk about getting up off the floor, because we know through the research that most early intervention, a lot of us do come and plop on the floor, right? That's what you do when you go into the home. So we're going to talk about why it's important not to just spend your whole visit on the floor, and what are some tips that you can use to help you do these things, help you let go of that toy bag, think broader, explore and join families in their different routines. So that's kind of where we're going today. So just so you have a picture of who's the mysterious voice on the phone, here's a picture of me. And I've placed this picture of me in my happy place. At least this morning, it was cold and dreary and kind of yucky looking outside, which is sort of what winter is to me. And I always feel like January and February are just the 2 months of the year I've got to kind of chug through to get to sunshine. So I put myself, or at least my head, on a beach on this picture because I want you to go to your happy place, to sit back and relax, enjoy the next hour. And I hope that you will join me in a conversation, that the next hour will be an opportunity for you to reflect on your own practices, to learn a couple things, and to hopefully leave the webinar with a tool or two, an idea, something new you can try to help you move closer and closer to best practices. Because that's kind of what we're all doing, trying to provide, the best services, the best supports to families and young children, because really that's what they deserve. So I've posted two URLs here on the screen. Just in case you don't know, our project coordinates the Virginia Early Intervention Professional Development Center. So you can see the URL on the screen here. We also coordinate the Early Intervention Strategies for Success blog. And so both of these offer you opportunities to be able to go explore, get more information for your own professional development, and evolve your practices. So I encourage you to check those out. So before we jump into our topic today, I wanted to find out a little bit more about you. So I'm going to ask you to use your polling tool to let me know what role you play in early intervention. And if you're just popping in, the way you take a poll is you look to the left of your slide in the participants box where you'll see your name or the name you used when you logged in. Below your name, you'll see the fourth box to the right has a lowercase a in it. Hover your cursor on that A, and then you'll see a drop-down menu appear. You can click on the A, B, C, D, or E choice that best matches your role. I'm going to pause to give you all a second to type in that, or to click on that letter so I can see what roles you play. If you click Other, go ahead and click it and then type into chat and tell me what other roles you play. Many of you probably play more than one. Once I see that folks have entered in their information, we'll publish the results. Okay, Jeannie, would you go ahead and publish the results, please? All right, great. So I see we've got service providers, service coordinators, local system manager, and other. And I guess other might be you, Dina. I see where you wrote that you were a local system manager for years. Yep. And ITC of Fairfax has added service provider. I don't know. You let me know, Fairfax. Are there a couple of you guys sitting together? That's what often I see when I see a program name on the program list. So I'm happy to have lots of different kinds of folks joining us today. And I encourage you, like I said before, to add your perspectives and your thoughts as we move through our content today. So welcome. All right, so we are going to take a bit of a winding path today. Today we're going to start out by talking about early intervention in the context of the traditional EI visit. And the traditional EI visit typically does happen on the floor. So you have a picture here. Let me see if I can pick up the cursor. So you have a picture here, and you have a picture of the service provider sitting on the floor while the parent is watching, and they're playing with kind of a pretty contrived activity. We've got our little 1-inch cubes. So this might be a traditional visit, and we're going to talk about what the characteristics are of a traditional visit, kind of why we do that, because we know in the research in early intervention, providing intervention using traditional methods persists, sort of despite what we know about best practice. Yep, Cassie says, woohoo, Lisa. Lisa's right here in the black, and I was very fortunate for Lisa and some other providers to help me out with modeling some of these pictures. So Lisa and her little boy Ben are my stars. So we're going to we'll go around the corner here, and then we will talk more about collaborative early intervention visits. And these visits don't typically happen on the floor, don't necessarily happen on the floor. They're more situated in everyday routines. So here we see we have a provider helping Lisa offer her son some choices for snacks. So that's really different than staying on the floor and maybe practicing choice making using puzzle pieces or books or even toys that the child likes the best. That's not a bad intervention, but he's really going to be motivated to make that choice when it comes down to what snack he wants. So we're going to talk about that. And in the context of discussing more collaborative intervention, we'll talk about the toy bag dilemma. And the toy bag dilemma really is, should we take it or not? And there are some people in our field that think it's a non-issue. We really don't even need to be talking about it anymore. And there are others that know from the research that many of us are still taking toy bags, or maybe we don't take a whole bag of toys, we just take bubbles in our back pocket. And so it's still the same concept. What I'm going to talk to you today about is that if you are moving your practice towards more collaborative intervention, really the toy bag becomes obsolete. The toy bag is almost like a tether that keeps you tethered to the floor. But we're going to talk about how to let that go so you can move your practices closer to what we know are best practices in our field. So to get us started, I want to get us all on the same page. So take a second and read the mission of early intervention. In case those of you might be joining us just by phone, I'm going to read it too. So Part C, early intervention, builds upon and provides supports and resources to assist family members and caregivers to enhance children's learning and development through everyday learning opportunities. So now I want you to type into chat, what are some of the key phrases that you heard or you read in that mission? What are some of the phrases that really jumped out to you as meaningful, as really informing what are we supposed to do when we're working with families? I'm going to pause now to give you a chance to type them in the chat. Okay, so I see Cassie's written in supports and resources. Yep. Dina writes that our purpose is to enhance learning and development. Yeah, Beth, I agree. Or builds upon. We really build on what the family's already doing, which is a really different way of looking at intervention than how we used to do it. Cassie points out learning opportunities. Yep, Piedmont says builds upon and provides supports. Everyday learning opportunities, enhancing and assisting family members. Yeah, you guys picked out all the ones that are really noticeable to me too. The interesting thing about this mission is that it really directs our attention to supporting family members, which is really different than providing child-focused intervention where we go work with babies. When I was a younger early interventionist and people would ask me, what do you do? I always found it really hard to explain my job. I don't know if you guys have had that experience, maybe because our job's so multifaceted. But I found myself saying things like, I work with infants and toddlers, or, you know, I've even had people say, oh, you play with babies, and what the response I would always get would be, aw, how nice, you must be so patient, when really that's not necessarily the case. But it was a struggle because to define my own role. And what the Office of Special Education Programs did is they brought together a work group that developed this mission. And the work group was made up of service providers and experts in our field. They came together to really think of what's the purpose of early intervention, what are we really supposed to do, and what's it supposed to look like. So they came up with this mission that's kind of broad, but really focuses our attention on helping the family members be able to interact with their children in ways that enhance development. And we want them to be able to do that every day, not just the 1 hour a week when we're in their home. This work group also came up with a document that if you haven't seen it, you should check it out. It's called the 7 Key Principles for Providing Early Intervention Services in Natural Environments. We have a link to it on here on screen, but you can also access it on the VEIPD site. Really, you can Google 7 Key Principles, Early Intervention, and it'll pop up. Great resource. So we have this mission defined. What we don't have it defined maybe as well are our practices. But what we do know, we know broad concepts for practices in terms of what we should be doing in early intervention. One of those broad concepts is family-centered practices. So we know as the umbrella over our work, we should be using family-centered practices. And family-centered practices include things like understanding that children develop in the context of family interactions. We can't separate children from their families anymore. You know, a long time ago, people would bring their kids into intervention centers, and this still happens sometimes, and the provider would take the baby back and work with the baby and then come back out and talk to the parent. And we know now that's not really how learning happens. Family-centered practices tell us that the family is the biggest influence on the child's development. So it encourages us to provide intervention in a way that supports the family's active participation, their informed decision making, and that really values families' choices, their beliefs, and their priorities. The interesting thing in the research is that by and large, early intervention providers, so I'm talking about educators, service coordinators, therapists, all of us, we say we believe in family-centered practices, but when folks watch our intervention work with families, we don't often practice what we believe in. And so one of those reasons might be because we're still trying to figure out what does it really, really look like when you're sitting in this situation with this family. How do you use them? So as a field, we kind of moved a little closer to defining them with natural learning environment practices. And natural learning environment practices tell us that children's learning occurs in the context of their everyday interactions in the places they go, in the activities they enjoy, and using the materials that are found in those environments. It also encourages us to explore environments where children with typical development would spend time. So it really broadens, it's a real broad concept that's much broader than the family's living room floor. We know that children experience thousands of natural learning opportunities every day. And I'm talking about even children who are part of families with more limited resources. We know that children, whether they have Toys R Us in their living room or whether they have very limited resources, maybe they'll tell you they watch TV all day. It's up to us to meet families where they are and help them identify the learning opportunities that are happening and take advantage of them. So then we have routines-based intervention. And our state has done some talking about routines-based intervention. This is intervention that's sort of provided in the context of families' everyday routines. So what we're talking about here is we know that learning happens. Most learning happens within the context of everyday routines, and most of those routines don't even happen while we're there in the family's home. We know that we don't create family routines, that these routines are something the family has chosen to do, and they offer tons of opportunities for children to learn and practice new skills and activities. We know that routines-based intervention is most effective when we join families in their routines, which is a challenge because not all those routines happen if we go every Tuesday at 10 o'clock. So ideally some flexibility is the best way to go. So I'm going to talk to you about kind of with these broad concepts, we're going to look at what we actually do on visits and how we can move towards more of these, what we know of these are best practices. So now I'm going to get you to think. I want to ask you a question. This is a true-false question, and what we're going to start thinking about comparing what we know with what we actually do. So think broadly, not just about your own practices, and type into chat true or false. Which answer do you think? So most early intervention visits occur on the floor with the child engaging in toy play. Type in the chat whether you think this is true or false in the big picture. Maybe not just for you, but across intervention that you see. All right, I see the trues have been pouring in. It looks like you guys, I'm going to scroll back through, it looks like you are pretty much unanimous, which is just really interesting, and you'll find is right. So this is a big giant red true. So this is what we know this from the literature too, so not just from our own experiences. From when researchers go and observe intervention visits, when they talk to families, or when they watch videos of intervention visits, by and large they still find that play-based interactions are the most commonly used. We're still playing on the floor quite a bit, and the play typically centers around toys. So if you think about what I just told you about what we know is most effective for providing interventions, it's not quite the same as this. So we're providing intervention in the context of one routine, primarily toy play. We're providing it in the context of one place, oftentimes on the floor. Yet we know from our best practice that applying intervention more broadly gets us better bang for our buck with kids. So let's think a little bit more about this. What we do know, and you guys can think about it with your own practice, probably not every visit happens on the floor, so there's a continuum. So when we think about early intervention practices, most of us are somewhere along a continuum. At one end, we have more traditional practices, and these practices are the way we know from the literature lots of folks are still using, and I'm not here to say these are bad practices. These are just one end of the continuum. So I want you to look at the picture here of the traditional intervention visit and type in the chat some descriptions for what you see happening in this visit. I'm going to pause for a minute to give you a chance to think and type in a couple of ways you describe the visit, maybe what the people are doing. Go ahead and type in some descriptors. Okay, I see folks, all three comments so far that the mother is not participating. So absolutely, she's actually back there in the background quite a bit away. And yep, just like ITC, you guys said she's in the background, she's kind of removed parents on the phone. So it's interesting, that's what jumps out at a lot of us. What do you notice about the provider? What's happening with her? She's here in the white shirt with the black pants. She's in the child's face. Yeah, she is in. She has her back to the parent. So she's, yep, maybe she's a little imposing. She's actually doing Itsy Bitsy Spider with the child, so maybe it looks a little more imposing than it is. She probably thinks this is what she's supposed to do. She's the one engaging with the child, so she and the child are doing kind of their own little thing. So when we think about traditional practice, what it typically does look like on the floor, and she's over here on the floor. She's got some toys. I don't know if you can see them over here. I think he's got a little something he was playing with, a little toy or horn or something there. But they're kind of removed, you're right. Oftentimes traditional practice reflects it's called a dyad instead of a triad. So the dyad here is the provider and the child. That's sort of the event of the visit. Oftentimes, maybe we might be modeling for the parent, showing the parent what to do, but the parent's not actively engaged in learning. Oftentimes, there's a focus on teaching missing skills, maybe missing skills that the child missed on the assessment tool, which we all know, best practices, we don't focus on missed assessment skills. So sometimes there's less of a focus on functional activities, more of a focus on maybe more more contrived activities. And so what really is the focus of the visit is what can be accomplished during that 1 hour by that provider. So now let's think about the other side of the continuum here and look at this collaborative visit. I'll tell you what the story of what's happening in this picture in a minute. But before I do, just type in the chat, what do you see happening in this visit, maybe compared to the other picture. Go ahead and type your descriptions in chat for the collaborative visit. Oh, that's such an interesting observation. Harder to tell who's the parent and who's the interventionist. Yeah, more engaged parent. Let me look back. Harder to tell. I love that. The parent's interacting and has her hands ready. The parent and the therapist are working together. Absolutely. So what you've described is what we know for collaborative visits. I love Fairfax, right? Caregivers involved with the interventionist support. So the collaborative visit, typically where there's a triad, the whole visit involves the parent, the provider, and the child working together. The focus is on teaching functional abilities and then really on enhancing that parent-child interaction so that they practice strategies and the parent knows what to do when the provider's not there. Intervention occurs in the context of play and caregiving routines, so they sort of provide the context for the visit. And the visit is really looked at as a practice session for the parent to problem solve, try out strategies, reflect on them, and plan for how to use them when we're not here, when the provider's not there. So which one of these two visits, which one of these two ends of the continuum are more aligned with the mission of early intervention? Type into chat what you think. Okay, so Fairfax writes, yeah, the collaborative, the triad. The Southwest writes that too. Okay. Great, you guys are right on it. Now we know, but think about though, like this is sort of what we know is best, but real life isn't always right exactly the same, right? So I want you to take a minute and to reflect on where your practices are in the continuum. If you're in a group, you might just have to take consensus, but I want you to think now, where am I? If I think about the work I do every day, which practices am I using? So we've got this long pink arrow because your practices probably aren't necessarily a one end or the other, maybe they are, but I want you to use your pointer tool to drop a pointer on the arrow to tell me where you think you are. So to use your pointer tool, you'll look to the left of your screen and you'll see a horizontal toolbar. It's actually right up against the participant box. The second box down, you see a little, maybe a smiley face or a starburst. When you click on that, an arm will extend. Then you can click on the pointer little icon that you want to use, drag your cursor over to the arrow, and drop that pointer by clicking again to show me where you think your practices are on the continuum. So I'm going to pause to give you time to do that. Okay, see Teresa's written a comment, the triad, you agree that the triad's more collaborative and more in line, but it gets interesting when there are other children in the home. It's no longer a triad, yeah, it's something bigger, right? And so I loved including children, siblings, other kids in the visits whenever you could, because they're often great teachers and they're often really motivated to help the child learn. So you're right, it does change the dynamic, Teresa, when you've got other people or other kids involved. Okay, well I see that you guys have put your marks all over here, and it's interesting, we have lots of a range, which is a very honest range. Typically we see folks all over, from one end to the next, and this will be a great opportunity for you today to reflect on why your practices are where they are, and how interested you are in moving them a little bit more towards the collaborative side. One of the things people often say is, well, I'm more traditional, when the family is less interactive, or I'm more collaborative in this situation. But what we know from the research is that more collaborative practices can be very successful with all families. And the person in the triad whose responsibility is to facilitate parent engagement is really you. But I do understand that's easier said than done sometimes. So let's look at what some of the things you can do to become more truly collaborative. I would encourage you to adopt family-centered practices, not just believe in them. So really think about your purpose in the home as there to facilitate the family's ability to use strategies when you're not there. Very different than how many of us were trained, like I came out of grad school as a teacher trained to teach babies. So really took a shift in thinking about what do family-centered practices really mean. I'd encourage you to think about how you individualize intervention and get to know families so you know what specific what specifically they mean when they tell you what the child likes to do. What specifically are their priorities? What's their end goal look like to them? What activities do they enjoy, or what activities would they like to do? What are the activities that are challenging? And then make those your context. In this picture here, I'll tell you the quick story. This picture here, what was happening was this little guy had some struggles with some balance and coordination, and his mother had a goal for him to be able to climb the stairs. Because as you saw in that first traditional picture, she had an infant and her little toddler, so she was carrying them up and down the steps all the time. So she got a stool, a little footstool, which you see here, and she would place it in different places to give him the opportunity to climb. So during the visit that I was videotaping and taking pictures of, she asked Laura, the provider here, for some ideas about how to use the step stool. So Laura said, well, tell me what you're already doing. And she said, well, every morning when he gets up, he climbs the stool to help me open his wardrobe and to pick out what he wants to wear. They also played a game where she would dangle his blankie off the wardrobe and he would climb up and snatch it down, and he would laugh. But what would happen is when he got to that top step, he would pop up on his toes. And so she asked Laura, how do I get him to not do that? Because whenever I try, I feel like he's going to lose his balance. So Laura asked if she could show the mother a really quick, easy trick to help him to come down on his toes safely. So that's what you see here. Laura was holding her hands on his hips to bring him down flat on his feet. And I caught the moment right when the mother was getting ready to put her hands where Laura's are so she could try out the strategy and feel what it felt like. So Laura was really focusing on a priority that the mother had, an activity that they already did, and then focusing on teaching the parent how to use a strategy to accomplish the goal that she was working on. It was a wonderful partnership between Laura and this mother. So I would encourage you also to think about natural environments broadly, not just this child's bedroom in our picture, and not just the living room floor, but think about all of the possibilities that are out there. I want to encourage you to think about the parent is truly the agent of change. It's the parent who's going to make the biggest difference in that child's development, and we know that, yet we still go practice by playing with toys on the floor. I want you to remember that most intervention and most child learning happen between visits. So we've got to think about how to take advantage of the time we have to make sure that families know what to do when we're not there. So let's think a little bit more. So if we know what we should be doing, let's think about what are the parents doing when we're not there. So here's another true and false question. True or false? Parents spend a lot of time playing with their children on the floor. Again, think broadly. Type into chat whether you think this is true or false. I see Alicia writes false with an exclamation point. Yep. All right, it looks like you guys are pretty unanimous again, which is great. So you are right on the ball. This is a big false. So think about the first question I asked you, that we tend to do our visits by playing on the floor with toys with the child. And that's where we want the parent. And when parents don't get down on the floor, we say, oh, they're not participating. But if we know we should be situating intervention in the things families do frequently, we also know, you guys know, and the research tells us, parents don't typically spend a lot of time playing with their children on the floor. So there's a real disconnect there. So let's think a little bit more about that. So what does play look like if they're not playing on the floor with blocks or puzzles or whatever? So I did a literature review a couple of years ago, which means that I looked at lots of articles to look for patterns. And my question in doing that review was, what were the play behaviors that parents engaged in when they played with their children, young children with disabilities or delays? And I found that there were two main contexts for play, for family, parent-child play, or just play in general that happened in families' homes. So I've got two pictures up here on the screen that are sort of illustrating these contexts. So I want you to think broadly again. Look at picture A and think about what context this might be representing. Now we're talking about for infants and toddlers, so I want you to look at what she's doing, who's in the picture. I'm giving you hints. Go ahead and type into chat what you think the play context is with picture A. Cassie says the mom might be on the couch, and yes, she does look like she's using the pen as a phone. It could be. I think the context, though, a lot of you guys hit on it right away. I love Cassie's answer. Me too. That's real world, isn't it? What the context here, and many of you hit it right on the head, is that the child's playing alone. So the first context was independent play within view of the parent. The second picture, picture B here, is illustrating another context. So go ahead, type into chat what you think the context for picture B is. And I'll give you a hint. It's not mealtime or breakfast. Think broader. Okay, you guys are making some great suggestions, and I think you're right, or you're hitting it right close to that. I mean, you're really getting it. Really what picture B is illustrating is playful interactions during caregiving routines. So those of you guys said social interactions, family time, conversation, selfless play during a routine. So what I found in the literature review, and you guys have identified it, is play that occurs independently with the child just nearby playing on her own, or play that happens in the context of an everyday activity, a caregiving routine, for the purpose of helping the child get through the routine, or helping the whole family get through the routine. And so what's missing here? What are the play contexts that you didn't hear? Type it into chat. What's missing? Yeah, these is a real life activity, you're right. That's right, Anna, the therapist is missing, absolutely. Peer interaction is not here. And those things are all important. Alicia hits it though, the floor, playing on the floor with the parent. So it's not to say that this isn't important, that it doesn't happen. It's just not one of the most common play contexts where families find themselves. Because they're moving through life, they're doing their thing, they're making dinner. The child's playing while the mom's making dinner, or the dad is getting the kids in the bathtub, or changing diapers. All of those kind of things happen so much more frequently than toy play on the floor. But that doesn't mean toy play isn't important. I mean, this is a lovely little picture of the mom. She's playing with her little chick magnet, her cute little boy, and they're playing. It's just you want to keep in mind that toy play is not the only routine that we should be using for intervention. If we want to get kind of the best bang for our buck, if we want to make the biggest impact and help families practice using intervention strategies across all of their interactions, we're going to focus on more playful interactions than play with toys. And we're going to try thinking beyond that floor level play. So it becomes just one thing we do instead of the main thing we do. So I know you guys are great at this, at thinking up of what natural learning opportunities exist. So if you look at these pictures, we have, here we have a great picture of a family mealtime, and this little guy here is definitely involved. We have a wonderful picture of a toddler. I love it. He's taking a bath in a bucket. We'll just assume he's maybe looking up at his caregiver. Here we have a picture of a mother who's talking with her daughter while they're at the grocery store. And here we have a playful interaction where a father is changing his son's diaper. So what I want you to do is think about the things that you tell families. If you're going to move beyond toy play, then of course you've got to be thinking about other routines, right? So these are all great examples of routines. And these are generally routines most families engage in at one point or the other. Changing diapers, bath time, eating, going out on errands. So looking at these pictures, what are some of the natural learning opportunities you might think of when looking at these pictures? If a family said, oh yeah, you know, changing his diapers is a time where we have lots of fun. What are some of the things you might see as natural learning opportunities? And you can use the diaper changing one or any of the pictures here. What are some of the opportunities that could exist in these routines? Go ahead and type them in the chat. You don't have to address all the pictures. Yeah, you can just type in a couple of them. I see Alicia's written in household chores. Reaching opportunities, sure, to reach for the food, to reach for Dad's face when he's playing over his little boy's feet, sure. Face-to-face interaction, communication and language. learning names, labeling foods, understanding, yep, receptive language, certainly social play, you're right, Cassie. So sensory, touch, object identification, there are tons of learning opportunities, and you guys have done a great job identifying those general opportunities. What we know from the literature is we tend to, as interventionists, because we're stuck on the floor, we're pretty good at coaching families in the context of toy play, because that's probably where we're most comfortable. When a family brings up a routine that isn't happening or doesn't tend to happen during the visit, we tend to discuss things instead of go practice. So if a family brings up a troublesome bath time, say, we are going to tend to say, oh, well, have you tried this? Have you tried this? Have you tried this? Now, those of you that have been through the coaching trainings know that a better way to approach that would be, tell me what you already do. An even better way to approach it would be to go join that routine. Try to schedule your visit during bath time. If meal times are troublesome, next time try to come during meal time. I know that's hard when you think about the real world of scheduling, but we're going to be a lot more effective when we dig in and find out what the specific natural learning opportunities are for this child and this family. Great way to do it is to talk about it, but an even better way to do it is to join it. So when you think about these routines, we really are talking about more playful interactions. We're really focusing on the family interactions with the child and how that family can help the child reach those outcomes. And that, I mean, whether we're talking about communication, social interaction, whether we're talking about helping a child learn to walk. We know from the research there are opportunities in families' everyday lives. We just have to help families find them sometimes. So you think, okay, where does the toy bag fit in there? So as you're moving your practices from a more traditional approach to a more collaborative approach, poof, the toy bag often disappears, kind of like what I said at the beginning about it becoming obsolete. And it becomes obsolete because you're no longer tethered to the floor. You're no longer tethered to those toys because you're thinking more broadly and you're getting up and joining the families where they are. I often think a toy bag is like a line in the sand. We don't tend to cross it to get up and go join routines, and families don't tend to cross it to join in the play that's happening, so they might be seen as more, kind of like we see here, as more passive observers because those toys don't belong to us. So let's think a little bit more about why the toy bag even is still an issue in our field. So why do we still bring it? So whether you still bring a canvas bag with your favorite toys in it, or maybe you just take a plastic bag with a couple of books in it, or like I said at the beginning, maybe you just take bubbles. Either way, you're still bringing things into the home that weren't there before, right? And we know from natural learning environment practices, using what the family has in their environment is going to help them be more successful with using strategies that are not there. So type in the chat some ideas about why do you think folks still bring the toy bag? You can speak for yourself, or you can think in general, like when we think about why are we still doing this in our field? And I'm not telling you it's a bad practice because I used to do it for a long time too. It's just something that we know from our research that there are other more impactful ways to provide intervention. So let's think about why do we still do it then? Okay, I see Cumberland, Mountain, and Dina both talk about comfort. Yeah, I think the toy bag, it makes us feel more comfortable. I used to talk about it as it was my security blanket. Habit, it's a prop. Jenny says that using things from it helps us fill up the time. Yep. Family thinks that's what we're supposed to do. Yeah, Cassie makes a great point. We tend to go on autopilot. We don't have to think outside the box. We can prepare fully before the visit because we know exactly what to bring and what we're planning to do with it. Oh, Anna writes something interesting. No toys or books in the home, and that's a really realistic situation, yeah. Because we use it because we want to engage the child and family. It's controlled, old habit, yep, easy. All right, you guys hit on all the reasons that I've come up with too, so I'll touch on them. You guys are right, we're thinking the same thing. So for the first one here, that I have on here, let me get my pointer. So the kids like it. That's what I've heard a lot of folks say, well, I bring it because the kids like it. Well, that's true. What child wouldn't like a really friendly person to come in their home with a bag of cool toys and play with them for an hour? That's okay, they love it, but that doesn't mean that's what we should be doing. This one here I think is a big one. I'm in control, and a couple of y'all mentioned that. I always felt like I knew exactly how many toys to bring to get through the hour. I knew exactly what I wanted to teach with my pegboard and my whistling shape sorter, and I could make it happen. I also found my toys worked. I knew what to do with my stuff. It was a little intimidating to think, I don't even know what toys the family has. I don't really know what else they do, so I'm really going to have to think on my feet when I go join that. I've heard people say too, I'm not real comfortable digging through their stuff. And when you use families' materials, you don't just rudely dig through their things. It's part of a learning process with the family to find out what does the child like to play with when you're not there, or what does he really not like to play with. And then you can use that to figure out, are there some skills or abilities that he is struggling with. Down here we have, I think somebody mentioned the family doesn't have toys. And that, again, I think is more for us than for the family. We take toys so that we have something to do. When they don't have toys, it's really hard for us to figure out what to do. One of the things I would suggest to you when you think about, okay, I take toys because families don't have them. Most children in the entire world don't have toys. It's hard for us to believe because we love toys in early childhood, but most kids across the many, many cultures in our world don't have toys. They don't have Fisher-Price, or they don't have stacking blocks, but they still manage to do things, to develop, to grow into happy, happy, productive adults. What they hopefully have is somebody interacting with them during the day, somebody taking care of them. So let's take advantage of that, because that's where learning really happens. The other reason we take the toy bags, I think somebody said, is just because that's how I've always done it. That's how many of us were trained. It feels safe. But you joined the webinar today, so you're clearly ready to think a little bit differently. So if you don't have toy bags, there's lots you can do, and we're going to talk about that. I want you to think, though, before we do move on, about what the toy bag might be communicating to the family. So think about these pictures here. These might give you some hints. You might have other ideas. Type in the chat, what are some things that when we bring a toy bag, what might the family perceive that as, or what might it communicate to them? Type some ideas into chat. Oh, that's interesting. Beth says it's the toys that make the difference. So we really would be sending a very different message from the one we want to send, that it's really the parent interacting with the child. Yep. So a lot of you hit on these. You don't have the right toys. So this lady down here, I wouldn't want her shaking her finger at me because she's saying, nope, you're not doing it right. Here we have the magic wand. Sometimes our toys can be seen as the magic wand. I remember teaching a little girl to sign more, say more, something with a shape sorter that I had, because I loved my whistling shape sorter. And I saw the mother's face after that, and she said, I've been trying to get her to do that for weeks. And so my magic just undermined her confidence as a parent. And that was absolutely not what I meant to be doing. Here in this picture here, we kind of have the toy bag here separating the parent and the provider. So it does sort of set things up. It could set things up where the parent thinks that she is supposed to have a more passive role because it's the provider who's going to really make the difference. So if you don't have toys, or you're going to think about, okay, today's the day I'm going to start taking fewer toys, there are lots of options. You can use what the family has, and so you start that conversation. Start talking about what do you have, what does he like to do every day? Can we go do that? Focus on those playful interactions. Think about, observe, find out what the families like to do, and then try getting up off the floor and exploring other routines. Some of you might have snow like this little guy here. If you do, bring your snow boots to your next visit and go outside. Try something different. So I'm going to walk you through a couple of tips, in just a second, to help you do that. But I always think about when I didn't take a toy bag anymore, there were some pretty awesome benefits. One of them was, well, I can't say no more back pain, but less back pain, because I wasn't lugging a toy bag in and out of the office. I wasn't, also when I got up off the floor, my back thanked me a lot. I was no longer sitting in one place for an hour leaning over the child working on blocks or whatever. I was moving, and so that was a lot better for me too. My husband was happy because he rediscovered my trunk. I no longer had toys in my trunk, and then I saved time because I didn't have to clean toys anymore. That was about the worst part of the job, was cleaning toys. So you'll be able to let that go too. So that's a huge benefit. So a couple of tips for helping you let go of that toy bag and get up off the floor. I would encourage you on your next visit to step back and observe. Observe the environment and observe the parent-child interactions. Look and see what's already happening and start training yourself to think about how to take advantage of those things and help seize the natural learning opportunities that are there. Ask the family about their routines that go well, and ask them about those that are challenging, and then plan to join them. If they have a routine that's going really well, that's a great place to embed some intervention, or it could be, because the child could be motivated. It could be something they do often, so the child will have more intervention more frequently. For a routine that's challenging, the parent might find a lot of motivation to fix that routine and to use strategies there too. So they both offer great opportunities. If you're using toys, or if you are staying on the floor, I'd encourage you to wean yourself off. And we know from the research, changing practices from more traditional to collaborative approach isn't easy for families either when they've been receiving more traditional intervention. So you might have to wean the child too. And an easy way to do that is just take one less toy every visit. You can leave the toy bag in the car. So if you're like me, you still have your security blanket. It's just outside in the car if I need it. And you'll find that it might make you feel a little better too. If you're thinking about getting up off the floor and not playing with toys, shake it completely up and meet somewhere that's not even in the home. Maybe you meet at the mall playland, or you meet at the park, or it's freezing now, so meet somewhere warm. But maybe you try finding out what the family likes to do and then going and doing that. It's a great way to sort of break that tether, change the routine, gives you a little bit more of a way to let go. I would encourage you not to do what I did. Years ago when I decided I'm done with the toy bag, I went cold turkey, didn't take a toy bag for a whole week on my visits, and it was kind of a disaster, to be honest. I felt like I didn't know what I was doing, and I vividly remember a grandmother saying, "Did you forget something?" She completely was thrown for a loop. Because I hadn't prepared myself or her well, I quickly learned that when I was going to not take toys to the visit and I had been, or I didn't want to stay on the floor and that's where I'd been, that I spent some time up front talking with the parent about why I wanted to try something new, and I got their permission to do that. So when you do think of toy play as just one of the routines you might explore, it's easier to get off the floor because your thinking is more broad. I think it makes your intervention world get a lot bigger, and the same for the families. When we only play on the floor, when we only interact in that one place, it's really hard for families to take what they watch us do, or to even take what they practice on the floor and use the same strategy at bath time or on errands. It's going to be a lot easier for the families, and we can make it easier on them when we join those routines and practice in real time. So a couple of tips for my top 3 for helping you get off the floor. I want to encourage you to give yourself permission to go where families go. Do what they do. Seek out the learning opportunities that are already there. And if the learning opportunities appear to be limited, use that as an opportunity to help families realize what they're doing and identify those things and build on them. I love this second question here. Ask the family, what would you be doing right now if I wasn't here? And then ask if you can go do that. So some families will be really willing to say, sure, let's hop up and go do it. Others might need a little more warning. They might want to clean that room or to feel like they're prepared if you're going to do something different next time. I know when the therapist came to work with my son years ago, even though I'd always told families that you don't have to vacuum the floor, I always vacuum the floor. So some families might want some prep. If that's the case, then identify a routine, talk about it, and schedule to join it next time. Or say, we're not going to do play with toys next time if that's okay. Let's think about something else to do, and the family, that'll help them be prepared. I can give you an example, and I've talked about this example before because it was an aha moment for me. I'd been playing on the floor with a little boy with his trains, and the mother was in the room for weeks. because when my first visit, that's where she wanted us to be. And we got nowhere. We were working on social communication, and he was a master at avoiding us. So finally I thought, I'm not doing something right here. So I asked the mother how she thought things were going. And she was too polite to say we weren't getting anywhere. So she said, it's doing okay, and she sort of tried to be very nice. And I said, I would like to try something different today. And I'm wondering how often you guys play on the floor with his trains like this. She said, oh, we never do this. This is where he plays by himself. So there's that independent play, right, that I talked to you about with the play context. So I said, well, what do you guys do if you're playing or enjoying each other? What do you do for fun? And she said, well, our favorite thing to do, we have this game we play in my bedroom where he jumps on the bed and I'll knock him down into the pillows or, plop him down in the pillows, and it's great fun. So I said, can I see? Would you mind if I saw? And she said, sure, come on in. So we went to the bedroom. They played their game. I had never seen this child more engaged because he wasn't very engaged so much when we played. And it was fabulous, this game they had, and they played it every day. And so it was an opportunity for me to coach her through some ideas. We came up with strategies. We embedded a ready, set, go routine in the midst of her routine where she would use those words. By the end of the visit, I'm not kidding you, he had said his first word. He approximated go to get the routine to continue. And when I went back a week later, he saw me. He came running through the house like a bolt of lightning by me, yelling go, heading right to the bedroom. So they had played that game all week, and he had learned the power of a word. And I never would have known it if I hadn't gotten up off the floor. So these are just 3 tips. You actually have a handout, and Jeannie has posted the handout link in the chat. So if you don't have the handout printed, you can click the link. I'm going to ask you to take a minute and look at this handout just to read through some of the other tips that I've provided for you. I'll pause while you're reading through, and then I'm going to ask you to post a tip in chat that you'll use this week when you go on a visit. So I want you to make a commitment to try to use something you've learned today. So read through the handout and post in the chat one thing you're going to try to do differently to help you get up off the floor, maybe help you explore families' routines and materials a little differently. I'll pause now while you read, and once you have a tip in mind, you go ahead and type it in the chat. Okay, great. Thanks, Rhonda. I see you're planning to ask what families would be doing and try working on that. That's a really good place to start. And it's a great one to help families start thinking about the power they have to use intervention with their child. Because when you think about it, we call ourselves interventionists, but the intervention really happens when we're not there. ITC of Richmond folks, you're going to meet at a new location. And Anna's going to ask good questions. We've got lots of resources in the blog, Anna, and on the early intervention, the training website that can give you some ideas about other good questions to ask. So I encourage you to check that out. There's some good questions documents on the Implementing Supports and Services page, which is under the Topics and Trends. Okay, Jessica is going to ask to see something fun they like to do that motivates the child. That's the key, Jessica, is asking if you can see it. Because in the past, oftentimes we just asked about it and then we didn't know what to do with it. Now you have permission to jump right in. Okay, and Dina points out, yeah, we're going to remember that the intervention happens when we're not there. It's challenging. Gloria's going to target a specific routine. Good. Okay, let me see if anybody else is typing. Alrighty, well I hope you guys take some more time to reflect on these strategies, and I hope they work for you. I believe you can do it. You joined the webinar today, so you're interested in thinking about how you can do the best practice, how you can use the best practices with families. I'd encourage you to ease yourself into a new practice, to start fresh with new families. I've heard lots of folks say that when you're changing your practices or you want to try something new, it can be easiest to start with new families. So you might have, when you have a referral for a new family come in, maybe try out some of these strategies. If you're together with some folks that are watching the webinar together, partner up and support each other in trying to change strategies or adopt, tweak what you do. There's nothing better than coming back to the office to share a success story or to get some help and some feedback when something didn't quite go as you planned it to go. And I would encourage you to do something different at every visit. That was one of the strategies I had in my head to think about changing and evolving my practices, is when my visits got to look the same, we were kind of doing the same thing, it was time to shake it up. And so think about doing something, teaching the family something different, working on a different routine. Try to do something different every time. And even if you need to work on the same routine for a couple of visits, you're going to tweak it every time. So that's it for today. I hope that you've gotten some tools today that you can use to let the toy bag go and get up off the floor. If I could sing, I'd break into Let It Go from Frozen, but I will spare you that. So I just put snowflakes on the screen because we could all sing it. You're going to leave the webinar with that stuck in your head the rest of the day. But I encourage you to take what you've used today and give it a try. I'd love to hear how it goes, so feel free to contact me. My email's on the screen. And if you want more information, check out the Professional Development Center website or the blog. If you've got ideas for resources you need to help you do this, to help you let the toy bag go and get off the floor, shoot me an email too, and I'll be happy to see what I can come up with. So if you have any other questions, now's a great time to plop them into chat. You're welcome, Alicia. I'm glad this was thought-provoking. That's wonderful. Well, thanks for everybody's feedback. I appreciate it. Are there any questions I can answer? Okay, well, I see a couple of folks are typing, so feel free to keep typing. I'll hang out until 1. Okay, so Gloria writes, any resources or books I'd recommend to help you with doing this? That's a really good question. I'm a really big fan of really practical stuff. There's a book out by Brooks. It's the Early Intervention Workbook. Gloria, it's a great book because it really talks about principles and the 7 key principles of early intervention and gives you exercises to help you think about implementing them. So the Early Intervention Workbook might be a great one. Let's see. Yeah, thank you, Dina, the EI Workbook. We have lots of good resources on our portal, and there are a couple of other webinars that talk about helping move your practices more aligned with best practices. There's a webinar called Tying the Knot that goes through the 7 key principles. There are a couple of webinars that are archived on there that talk about using communication strategies and in the context of family routines. Another book I like, Robin McWilliams' The Routines-Based Early Intervention book. That's a great one. That one has gives you more information about how to gather information from families to find out about their routines. It doesn't include as much about what to do on early intervention visits, but it's still great for broadening your knowledge. So I hope that helps. If you need more ideas, feel free to email me and I'll dig through my books and I can let you know. Okay, Anna writes, it would be nice to figure out how to do an assessment without our toys. You are so right. You're right. The first thing families see is us bringing our suitcase full of toys. Wouldn't that be interesting? That's something somebody should look at. I really think we could do a true functional assessment without toys, but it would take a lot more observation, and we'd really have to observe children multiple times, which is problematic given our system, with the timelines and things. But there are folks doing more authentic assessment where they're looking at, children are observed with multiple folks in different places that might be a little more aligned with that. But that's a great point, Anna, is that the first thing we do is bring toys in for the assessment. It's a really good observation. Okay, well, I'm looking to see if anybody else is typing, and it doesn't look like we have any other questions. So I want to thank you all for your time today, and I hope you'll join us for our next webinar in March. We've got some great topics coming up. The registration information for our next webinar will be up in the next couple of weeks. So I hope you'll join us. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Bye.